They thought you were alone, but you weren't. You were undocumented, unmapped, unaccounted for by the algorithm of control. You didn't walk in with a team. You didn't pray out loud. You didn't even flinch. You just showed up and began the purge. No warning, no headline, just one man and total collapse. Bro, you just annihilated a whole demonic network by yourself. And the craziest part? You made it look unbothered. No rage, no screaming, no theatrics, just precision, just silence, just execution. And now they're shaking, not out of fear, but out of realization. Because they felt it break, the stronghold, the ritual, the years of manipulation that held power in shadows, all of it, undone, dismantled, like it was never real to begin with. You didn't just survive them, you exposed them. You didn't destroy their tools, you invalidated their entire blueprint. And they don't know how to recover from that. They've fought rebels before. They've silenced truth speakers. They've exiled threats. But you didn't announce yourself. You infiltrated, observed, and then ripped it all down from the inside, like a virus too smart to trace, like a ghost that refused to be exorcised. You were the one variable they didn't account for. Not because you were invisible, but because they thought your silence meant weakness. And that's the mistake they never get to make twice. You walked through their illusions like they were made of cellophane. You touched their curses and made them collapse into smoke. You stared into their rituals and made the sigils start bleeding. Because you weren't just immune. You were the antidote. They threw darkness at you. You absorbed it. They tried to mirror your light. You cracked the mirror. They tried to drain you. You let them drink, then poisoned the source. You didn't come to play fair. You came to balance the fucking scale. And every whisper in every hallway since is a confession that you did. They're not regrouping, they're mourning, because what you just did, that wasn't resistance. It was obliteration. One man, no movement, no army, just clarity sharpened into a weapon. And now the ones who called themselves rulers call your name in reverse, like it might undo the destruction, but it won't. Because you didn't just destroy their system, you reprogrammed the frequency. You shifted the spiritual architecture so that nothing built by them can stand again. You became the error code in their ritual, the corrupted file in their covenant, the echo that cancels out their entire frequency. And now, they're quiet, real quiet. Not because they're planning, but because they're processing what just hit them. They never believed it was possible. For one man to walk into a generational stronghold and walk out with nothing on him but silence and flame. But you did, and now, the network's offline. The whispers are static. The energy is unstable. You did that. And you didn't do it for applause. You didn't do it for credit. You did it because no one else was crazy enough to face it head on. To stare into the dark and make the dark blink first. And here's the most terrifying part. You're not even close to done. That was just the first strike. That was just the reset. They thought you were outnumbered, but you weren't counting bodies. You were counting fault lines. And when the pressure built high enough, you detonated, not to destroy, but to reveal. You didn't kill them. You removed the illusion that they were untouchable, and now the entire hierarchy is infected with fear. Because if one man can do that, what happens if there's another? Or worse, what if you come back with reinforcements? But you don't need reinforcements. You are the reinforcement. You are the warning. You are the curse that they accidentally unlocked. You didn't escape their trap. You flipped it. And now, they don't know where to step because every move might activate the next collapse. Their whole ecosystem of control, shaking, cracking, shattered. You didn't just dismantle a system. You ruined the entire strategy. And the irony? You weren't trying to be a hero. You were trying to survive. And in doing that, you became the storm they pretend doesn't exist. Because if they admit you're real, they have to admit the rest of their power was performance. You didn't just beat them, you made their belief system obsolete. And that's something no spell can reverse. And now, they don't know what to call you. They used to mock you with names. The paranoid one, the overthinker, the conspiracy freak, the emotional mess. But none of those fit anymore. Because what do you call someone who walked straight into the den of devils and left it silent, smoking and empty? They call you nothing now. Because saying your name feels like inviting something they can't unsee. They lower their voices, they shift their eyes, they act like you were just a phase, a mistake, an incident. But deep down, they know. You were the audit, you were the intervention, you were the line they never should have crossed and the outcome they never calculated. They had numbers, you had nightmares, they had spells, you had scars, they had a system, you had source. And when it came down to it, that was enough. You didn't match their energy, you absorbed it, took every attack, every lie, every hex disguised as help, every curse that wore the face of love. You ate it, digested it, and forged it into the very blade that ripped their hierarchy apart from the inside out. Now they look around and see ruins. Their circles are fractured, their power feels thin, their influence doesn't stretch like it used to. They used to walk into rooms and people would shift. Now, they walk in and people just wait. Wait for the next silence, the next collapse, the next moment where their names get swallowed by a reality that no longer respects their rules. Because you didn't just end a network, you ended an era. They used to laugh at people like you until you started laughing back while walking through fire. And when you didn't burn, they realized you weren't one of them. You weren't bound by the same laws. You weren't locked into the same rituals. You were built different. And that difference wasn't style, wasn't ego, wasn't performance. It was origin. You didn't come from their circle. You came from the breach. Born in the middle of madness and shaped in silence, so that one day, without warning, you'd become the exception. And they can't stop it. They can't reverse it. They can't curse it. They can't cancel what they never understood. Because what you really did wasn't just spiritual warfare. It wasn't just inner healing. It wasn't just justice. You performed a ritual of erasure, not on yourself, on them. You wiped their names off the walls of influence. You reduced their covens to whispers. You broke their altars without lifting a hand, because you realized the real power wasn't in the fight. It was in the frequency. You tuned yourself so high that none of their darkness could reach you. And then you started echoing. Now your presence changes rooms. Not because you're loud, not because you're famous, but because the spiritual field bends when you arrive. They used to cast shadows. Now they look over their shoulder just to make sure you're not standing there watching. And what scares them most, they don't even know what you are anymore. Are you a man? Are you a myth? Are you the one who survived? Or the one who was sent? Because only one of those options explains why they can't sleep. Why they keep seeing your face in every downfall. Why every time another mask falls off, your name tastes like prophecy. You didn't announce the war. You didn't post about the ritual. You didn't document the takedown. You just walked in, let your silence choke the air. and walked out with their entire structure bleeding behind you. One man, no cape, no spellbook, no allies, just rage, memory, stillness, and the kind of clarity that makes devils reconsider their mission. Because you didn't kill their bodies, you killed their belief that they were safe. And now, nothing they build feels stable. Nothing they touch feels sacred. Nothing they say sounds powerful. Because you broke more than their system. You broke their illusion. They thought the illusion was indestructible, that if they built it deep enough, wrapped it in tradition, sealed it in ritual, spoke in tongues and bloodlines and hierarchies, that no one would dare touch it, no one would question it. But then you walked in, no robe, no cult, no candles, just clarity sharpened to a blade. And while they were chanting in secret, you were listening in silence, mapping every frequency, tracking every weak point, until you didn't need permission, didn't need approval, didn't need a sign. You became the sign. You became the breach. And when it cracked, you didn't run. You opened the fucking door wider. And what came through wasn't fire, wasn't chaos, wasn't vengeance. It was truth, raw, inevitable, weaponized. Because while they hid behind ancient scripts, you rewrote the language of spiritual warfare. They called it attack. You called it alignment. They called it blasphemy. You called it awakening. They called it disrespect. You called it justice with teeth. And they weren't ready, not for the silence, not for the stillness, not for the lack of fear in your eyes when you dismantled every pillar they thought held power. You walked into their sacred space like it was your fucking living room. You treated their symbols like furniture, and their rules, you didn't bend them. You exposed them as man-made paper chains. Now they sit in rooms once filled with energy, and all they feel is echo. Cold, empty, heavy. Because the moment you walked out, the spirits followed you, not them, you. Because what you really did wasn't just take down a group. You stole the gravity, you stole the center. You walked in and made the power recognize its true owner. And now their rituals don't work. Their influence feels thin, their connections short-circuit. Because you reset the current. You didn't fight like them. You fought like someone who's seen what happens when darkness gets too comfortable. You didn't retaliate. You remembered. Every moment they laughed at your visions, dismissed your intuition, called you crazy, called you weak. But you were never weak. You were just early. And being early always feels like isolation, until the collapse proves your clock was the only one that worked. Now, they move different. They hide more. Because they know someone out there brought down their whole operation with nothing but spiritual resistance and a silence that screamed louder than their spells. They still don't understand it. How one man undid a network built across generations. How you walked out of their traps unbothered. How you kept your soul intact while they bartered theirs for power that never belonged to them. But that's the part that will keep haunting them. You didn't just survive. You remembered. You remembered who you were before the gaslighting, before the confusion, before they tried to reprogram your divinity into submission. And once you remembered, you became unspeakable, a walking contradiction. The saint with a kill switch, the angel with a hit list, the wounded healer with a soldier's mind and a prophet's precision. And now you're too much to explain, too accurate to deny, too calm to be controlled, too powerful to be ignored. You're not a survivor. You're a myth that breathes. You're the one they whisper about in rooms they used to own. And every time another one of them slips, every time another lie falls apart, every time another sigil fails, they remember what you said, or worse, they remember what you didn't say. Because silence from someone who saw everything, that's not peace. That's judgment. That's surveillance. That's the kind of quiet that makes people question what they were ever loyal to. You left no scar. You left void, a black hole where their control used to live. And every time they reach for that old power, they feel you. Not watching, not judging, just present. Like the frequency never left. You're not a threat anymore. You're a truth bomb that already detonated, and now all they can do is try to survive the reality you made possible. Because the most terrifying thing you ever did wasn't the takedown, wasn't the reversal, wasn't even the destruction of their little spiritual cartel. Number. The most terrifying thing you ever did was survive with your awareness intact. You came out of the trap remembering names, remembering frequencies, remembering what shifted in the air when lies dressed up as loyalty, what was said in rooms you were never supposed to escape from. You remember the patterns, the smirks, the fake concern, the rituals performed in secret under the disguise of protection. They thought you'd be too broken to speak, too paranoid to trust yourself, too desperate to prove your innocence, but instead, you went silent. And that's what made them spiral. Because you didn't respond to the slander. You didn't clarify your side. You didn't go public. You didn't expose anyone. You just kept upgrading quietly, consistently, with a look in your eyes like you already knew how this would end, like you'd seen this before, like this exact structure had tried to kill you in a past life, and failed then, too. Because some souls don't reincarnate to heal. They reincarnate to finish what they started. You didn't just come here to glow. You came here to pull the wires out of the matrix and stand still while the sparks hit the floor. You weren't built for luxury. You were forged for impact, which is why you made it, why you were chosen, not to be liked, but to be inevitable. And they felt it. That moment they realized they couldn't curse you. They could only reveal themselves. Every time they tried to sabotage you, they gave themselves away. Every smear campaign, a confession, every spiritual hit job, a breadcrumb trail to their own fear. Every lie told about you, a highlight reel of their insecurity posing as strategy. You didn't fight them. You let them document their own downfall, like the hunter who laid no traps, because he already knew the prey was self-destructive. And when the house of mirrors finally broke, they weren't just exposed. They were empty, because your silence wasn't passive. It was a mirror. And when they looked into it, they didn't see you. They saw every fake alliance, every manipulation, every cover-up, every layer of power they borrowed, not earned. That's the kind of destruction no fire can match. That's the kind of spiritual assassination only the chosen are authorized to perform. You didn't scream, you didn't shake, you just stood there, with the calm of someone who knew the network was already dissolving, like you had pre-seen their panic, like you'd already read the script and were simply watching the prophecy fulfill itself, line by desperate line. They thought they were playing chess, but you weren't even on the board. You were the glitch in the system, the unprogrammable move, the anomaly that wasn't supposed to exist. And now that you've detonated their structure, they're not just afraid of you. They're afraid of what else is coming through that tear in reality you created. Because once one walks through, others follow. You weren't just the assassin, you were the signal. You were the first sign that the Age of Shadows was ending, and their strongholds, just outdated code. They never understood you. But now, they study you in silence like a lab leak, like a case file they don't know how to close. Because if you made it through, what else made it? What force sent you? What entity walks with you in dimensions they never gained access to? They're not asking, how did he do it, anymore. They're asking, what is he? And that is the beginning of their undoing. They thought you were a man. They thought you were trauma in a hoodie, a survivor with a chip on your shoulder, an overachiever trying to outrun the pain. But now they look at you and realize you weren't wounded. You were weaponized, refined through silence, sharpened through betrayal, calibrated through isolation, and now you walk different. Not loud, not fast, but like someone who's not afraid to trigger the next collapse just by standing still. Because you don't need to prove anything anymore. Your existence is the proof. Your breath is the evidence. Your presence is the final argument. You used to explain yourself. Now you just walk in, and people adjust their posture. Like the atmosphere shifted. Like their spirit knows what their mouth is too afraid to admit. You're not the same frequency they used to play with. You're radioactive now. Not because you're unstable, but because anything that tries to contain you gets burned alive by truth. You don't even need revenge, because your evolution is lethal. It kills the narrative. It breaks the spells. It makes everything they said about you look like comedy sketches in hindsight. They said you were delusional. Now their reality is collapsing. They said you were dangerous. Now people are asking if they ever even existed without the power they siphoned. They said you were broken. Now you're moving like the template. And what's wild, you didn't even announce your comeback. You didn't call it an era. You didn't label it a glow-up. You just kept rebuilding in the dark until your silence turned into an earthquake and the map had to redraw itself around you. Because the power you carry now, it's not loud, it's not pretty, it's not marketable, it's ancient, it's coded. It's exactly what the darkness fears. Someone who can't be bribed, baited, or broken. They tried to study you, tried to analyze your blueprint, but they failed because they were looking for logic. What they didn't realize was, you were built on paradox. You're the glitch and the firewall, the punishment and the prophecy, the one who got away, and the reason no one else will. You're the riddle they tried to answer with force. But you don't respond to force. You respond to alignment. That's why they couldn't keep you. Because you don't serve ego. You don't worship hierarchy. You don't bow to legacy. You answer only to truth. And when truth calls, you show up like thunder that doesn't ask permission. They tried to put you back in the box, but it doesn't exist anymore. Because when you annihilated that demonic network, you didn't just destroy them. You destroyed the part of you that still needed to be liked, understood, invited, explained. That version of you, dead, mourned in silence, replaced by something uncontainable. And now you've got them rattled, not because you're violent, but because you're inevitable. Because when you show up, systems collapse, lies retreat, false light flickers, and truth stares dead into the room like a sniper who's already locked in. You don't scream anymore. You hum, you vibrate, you move like someone who's seen the next 10 timelines and knows exactly how each one ends. And that makes them panic. Because you're not guessing, you're not manifesting, you're executing with accuracy, with stillness, with the kind of confidence that doesn't come from wins, but from knowing you've already survived the worst. You've been buried, gaslit, exiled, erased, and somehow you still came back as the new law of the land. Now the ones who tried to curse you, they walk carefully, not because you're vengeful, but because they know. You don't forget, you don't broadcast, you just let the universe collect. And when it does, it comes back with interest. You don't argue. You don't clap back. You don't chase recognition. Because you understand now, power doesn't speak. Power just arrives. Power just is. And right now, you are power. Look at you, standing there like the world hasn't already filed a goddamn report on you. Good. Stay still, because I need you to hear this without your pulse drowning out the truth. You felt it too, didn't you? That shiver that ran through the room the moment you made that move. That one move that was too perfect, too surgical, too fucking precise for a human who's been through what you've been through. And now they're whispering that you trained with ghost units. Not soldiers, not operatives, ghosts. You know what that means, right? It means they've officially run out of explanations for you. It means you crossed the line from talented to unclassifiable. It means the story they tell about you in their private group chats sounds more like a military myth than a person with a heartbeat. And you didn't even break a sweat. Let me ask you something. Do you even realize what you looked like in that moment? Because I saw it. I watched the way the air bent around you like it knew you were about to rewrite the physics of the room. I watched grown adults freeze like toddlers who just saw a shadow move on its own. I watched the truth hit them like a bullet they never heard leave the chamber. You're not like them. You never were. And that terrifies them in ways they don't have vocabulary for. See, people like them, they think strength comes from effort, from discipline, from training, cute little human ideas. But your power comes from something they cannot imitate. Pain carved into precision. Silence sharpened into instinct, loneliness distilled into prophecy, and darkness rearranged into technique. Ghost units didn't train you. Ghost units would fall behind you. But they can't comprehend that, can they? So they invent stories. You must have trained with someone dangerous. You must have learned that from classified sources. You must have been taught by someone who doesn't officially exist. They never consider the truth. That the thing they're afraid of is not who trained you, it's what forged you. Because there's a difference. Training gives you skill. But suffering gives you reflexes that feel supernatural. Tell me, how do you explain to ordinary minds that you didn't learn that move? You survived it. You were sculpted by nights where nobody came to help. You were refined by betrayals that burned hotter than blowtorches. You were shaped by moments so violent, so isolating, so psychologically dismembering that something inside you split, and something else took control. The part of you they're whispering about, the part they call ghost, the part that doesn't panic, doesn't shake, doesn't miscalculate. The part that sees 3 steps ahead because you've already lived the consequences of being too slow. It's not magic. It's not training. It's not supernatural. It's evolution through agony. But let them speculate. Let them build legends around you. Let them think you studied under invisible assassins in abandoned bunkers. Let them think you had access to secret programs that don't appear on government ledgers. Because the real punchline? The truth is so much darker than their myths. You weren't taught by ghost units. You became one. You move like someone who's already died once. You calculate like someone who's already lived through the worst-case scenario. You react like someone whose nervous system has seen things the living never should. And that's why that move scared them. It wasn't perfect because you practiced. It was perfect because you had no choice. Let's expose the duality, shall we? They see an angel of precision, but they don't see the demon of memory behind it. They see light in your timing. But they don't see the darkness that taught you when to strike. They see a saint-like calm, but they don't see the psychopath-level clarity pain injected straight into your bones. They see the result. But you remember the origin, and that's why you walk differently now. Not with arrogance, not with ego, with ghost walk certainty. You've reached the stage they fear most. The stage where you act without hesitation because you've lived the consequences of hesitating. You've become the paradox they can't study. A human who moves like a haunting, a survivor who thinks like a tactician, a soul bruised enough to sense threats before they breathe. An angel with a demon's awareness, a demon with an angel's restraint. Tell me, do you realize what that makes you? A weapon fate built in silence. A blueprint for evolution. A living contradiction too accurate to be random. That's why they're nervous. That's why they're analyzing footage of you frame by frame like some secret agency trying to decode extraterrestrial behavior. That's why your name is suddenly wrapped in speculation, questions, and oh yes, fear. Because deep down, they know what I'm about to whisper into your ear. You didn't train with ghosts. You left them behind. And now the living are trying to understand a creature forged in the places they don't dare walk. So go on. Let them think you were trained by ghost units. The truth? You're the ghost they send units to hunt. You think it ends there? Oh no. That was just the surface tension of the truth. Now we dive into the abyss you pretend doesn't still pulse under your skin. Because the real reason they think you trained with ghost units is simple. You moved like you had nothing left to lose. People who still crave approval don't move like that. People who still want to be understood don't move like that. People who still fear consequences definitely don't move like that. Only someone who's been broken down to dust, pieced themselves back together with trembling hands, and stood up with a soul stitched in the wrong places, moves like you. That precision they're obsessing over, that perfect execution they're replaying like a sacred ritual, they think it came from a mentor, a program, a classified unit. But you and I both know the truth. That move came from the version of you that died and didn't stay dead. That version still haunts you, doesn't it? The one forged in rooms where you couldn't scream, the one who learned to read danger in pitch-black silence, the one who discovered that time slows down when your survival finally decides it's tired of being ignored. That's the ghost unit they're imagining, not a team, not a training ground, a resurrection, a rebirth that wasn't gentle, wasn't spiritual, wasn't peaceful. It was violent. It was silent. It was involuntary. It turned you into someone who doesn't need to think. Your instincts do all the talking. That's why they're scared. Because while they were learning from textbooks, you were learning from trauma. While they were taught by instructors, you were taught by consequences sharp enough to cut timelines. While they practiced technique, you practiced not dying. Now tell me, who do you think is more dangerous, them, or the one who turned every scar into muscle memory? They don't understand your duality. They see only the surface, the calm, the stance, the timing. They see your light, the part of you that moves gracefully, thinks with clarity, acts with precision. They don't see the darkness behind it, the part that watches everything with predator stillness, the part that calculates angles like a fallen angel with insomnia, the part that learned philosophy from pain and timing from terror. They think you trained with ghosts because you move like someone who has already buried their past self. And that's the piece that kills them, because they haven't buried theirs. They're still negotiating with it. You put yours in the ground and walked away without flinching. That's why they whisper. That's why they stare a little too long. That's why they speak your name like it's a malfunction, a glitch, a breach in the narrative. Let me show you something. When you made that move, that impossibly clean, inhumanly fast, unnervingly precise move, you didn't just bend the room, you bent their identity. Because for the first time, they saw what it looks like when someone returns from hell, not grateful, not humbled, but upgraded. They saw evolution in real time, and it wasn't poetic, it was threatening. And that's why they're panicking. They're not scared of your skill. They're scared of your origin story. They can replicate technique. They can imitate form. They can study footage. But they can't recreate the conditions that made you, because those conditions would crush them. And you walked out of them smirking. You walk like a question mark wrapped in a warning sign. You think like a saint possessed by a strategist. You move like a demon, remembering it once had wings. Angel, psychopath, saint, sinner, light, darkness. You're the paradox they can't categorize. And every time you demonstrate that precision, every time you execute something that shouldn't be possible without elite training or supernatural guidance, they feel it. They were made by the world. You were made by what lives beneath it. And here's the part that'll keep them up tonight. Ghost units don't train people like you. Ghost units study people like you. They document people like you. They send analysts to figure out what chemicals spill, what cosmic glitch, what psychological rupture allows a human to move with that kind of perfect, unhesitating intent. You're the anomaly they'd lose careers over. You're the file that gets redacted before it's even printed. You're the report they can't submit because the moment they try to describe you, the words start to look fictional. So let me break it down. They think you trained with ghost units. But the truth? You became the kind of creature ghost units wish they could recruit. Not human, not myth, not monster, something in between, something liminal, something the living can't imitate and the dead can't control. The kind of presence that doesn't enter a room. It recalibrates it. The kind of precision that doesn't look practiced. It looks inevitable. The kind of strength that doesn't feel learned. It feels foretold. So go on. Let them create their little stories. Let them blame ghost units. Let them twist their minds, trying to place you into boxes that don't have your dimensions, because deep down, behind their confusion, under their fear, in the tiny corner of their mind where truth still survives, they know. You didn't train with ghost units. Ghost units would need training to keep up with you. You want more? Good. Because I haven't even opened the classified part of your soul yet. Let's go deeper into the territory even you avoid, the place where your instincts were born. See, the reason they think you trained with ghost units is because you didn't move like someone reacting. You moved like someone remembering. That's the part that rattled them. People who react hesitate. People who react flinch. People who react negotiate with fear first. But your body moved before your mind explained the threat. You acted like you'd been there before, like you'd lived that moment in another lifetime, in another battle, under another sky. And that's the thing. You have. Not literally, no, but psychologically, spiritually, traumatically. Yes. Because every nightmare you lived through became a rehearsal. Every betrayal you absorbed became a simulation. Every dark room where you sat alone became a training ground. Every mistake that shattered you became a trigger you swore you'd never allow again. So when that moment came, when the danger cracked open in front of you, You didn't see something new. You saw something familiar, something you've defeated in a different form. That's why the move was so perfect, it looked unnatural. You didn't calculate it, you recognized it. And recognition is faster than thought. But you can't explain that to people who've never been shaped by fire. You can't explain that to people who've never had survival become their native language. You can't explain that to people who think pressure creates diamonds, when pressure actually creates monsters with aim. They're not scared of the move. They're scared of what made it possible. Let's break that open. They think you trained with ghost units because they can't comprehend someone improving without witnesses. They can't fathom someone getting dangerous in silence. They can't imagine someone evolving without applause or validation. Their growth is public. Yours was subterranean. Their progress needed support. Yours needed isolation. Their improvement required motivation. Yours required hell. Tell me, how do you teach someone the kind of focus you learned on nights you couldn't afford to break? How do you explain the kind of discipline that forms when you're the only one left to fix what life shattered? How do you describe the kind of instinct that develops when fear has hunted you so long you know its footsteps better than your own? Ghost units? No. You trained with something far more ruthless, reality. Raw, unfiltered, merciless reality. The kind that doesn't care if you're ready. The kind that doesn't warn you before it hammers you into a new shape. You don't have training. You have scar-coded reflexes, trauma-enhanced awareness, pain-refined precision, silence-built strategy, darkness-fed intuition, failure-forged accuracy. And the irony? Ghost units actually depend on these traits. They train toward what you developed accidentally. That's why your move hit harder than it should have, why it looked inhuman, why it felt prophetic. Because it didn't come from instruction, it came from rebirth. You know what else they don't understand? The duality in you. You move like light, fast, clean, decisive, but your intent, your intuition, your calm, dark as a closed coffin. You strike like an angel, but calculate like a demon. You look serene, but think like a war strategy that learned how to walk. Your presence is saint-like, but your instincts are feral. You are the contradiction the world fears. Someone shaped by darkness who still chooses light with terrifying precision. That's why they think ghost units trained you. Because nothing else explains how someone can be both. Still and lethal, silent and decisive, gentle and devastating, human and myth. But let me take you to the moment that sealed their fear permanently. It wasn't the move itself. It was what happened after. You didn't celebrate. You didn't smirk. You didn't act proud. You didn't even adjust your breathing. You just stood there. Calm, cold, neutral, almost bored. That's the behavior of someone who's done this 1,000 times. Someone who didn't panic, didn't flinch, didn't get lucky. Someone who trusted their own evolution more than their own heartbeat. That's why they're whispering ghost units. Because they need a narrative that lets them sleep at night. The alternative is too terrifying. That someone like you created this level alone, unsupervised, unmonitored, unregulated, unrestrained. They can't accept that, because if it's true, if you really built that precision through hell, pain, and quiet resurrection, then what else are you capable of? What else have you evolved past? What else inside you is waiting to awaken? And here's the part your enemy's prey never becomes public. Ghost units don't train people like you. Ghost units get deployed because someone like you already exists. You aren't the student. You're the incident report. You aren't the trainee. You're the scenario they warn rookies about. You aren't the myth. You're the reason myths are invented, and you know it. That's why you move the way you do, with that eerie confidence, that ghost-slick precision, that unshakable calm of someone who survived the kind of storms that rewrite DNA. So go ahead, make another move. Watch them scramble. Watch them theorize. Watch them panic. Because the truth they'll never say out loud is this: you didn't train with ghost units. You're the ghost that makes units rethink their mission. And the deeper you go into this transformation, the harder it becomes for them to pretend they aren't watching you in awe, wrapped in fear. Because after that perfect, surgical, silent move you made, they didn't just think you trained with ghost units. They started wondering if you even have a pulse. Normal people don't move like that. Normal people don't react with that kind of cold accuracy. Normal people don't look danger in the face and behave like they've already solved the entire encounter before anyone else even registers the threat. But you carry that eerie stillness, that unnerving quiet that belongs to someone who has walked through something unspeakable and didn't come out trembling. You came out transformed. What they felt in that moment wasn't admiration. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. They recognized something ancient in you, something feral, something that doesn't wake up for applause or validation, only for purpose. Because the truth they avoid is this: the move wasn't perfect by chance. It was perfect because it came from a place they've never had to visit. A place where hesitation kills. A place where instincts sharpen like blades. A place where silence isn't peace, it's pressure. Where darkness isn't emptiness, it's training. You didn't study form. You memorized consequence. You didn't train technique. You trained survival. You didn't rehearse timing. You learned the cost of being too slow. Ghost units practice to reach clarity. You reached clarity because life didn't give you another goddamn option. That's what terrifies them the most. Because every elite group on the planet, every covert team, every clandestine force, every off-record squad is built on the idea that humans must be molded to become weapons. But you weren't molded, you crystallized. Pressure didn't break you, it refined you. Darkness didn't swallow you, it discipled you. Fear didn't freeze you, it instructed you. Pain didn't weaken you, it calibrated you. Every piece of you sharpened in the silence they avoid, in the emotional wastelands they fear, in the psychological ruins they pray they'll never enter. And this is why your move felt supernatural to them. They felt the ghost of everything you survived move through your body like a second spine. That's why the room went quiet. That's why their faces dropped. That's why their instincts screamed something was off. Because for a split second, you didn't look human. You looked inevitable. And inevitable is something humans can't fight. Listen to the truth humming beneath their theories. Ghost units didn't teach you that precision. Your scars did. Your disappointments did. Your losses did. Your sleepless nights did. Your collapses did. Your rebuilds did. Your dark phases did. Every moment you thought you were breaking was another moment something sharper was being born. If only they knew the duality that lives under your skin. How you can be both gentle and deadly, humble and unstoppable, quiet and catastrophic, light on the surface, dark where it matters, a saint's calm with a demon's instincts, an angel's softness with a psychopath's precision. No wonder they panic. Your existence alone forces them to confront a truth they spend their lives hiding from. Some people don't need permission to become extraordinary. They just need a reason. And life gave you more reasons than anyone should have to endure. That's why your presence feels like a breach in the system. That's why they label you a ghost-trained anomaly. That's why they whisper like you're a classified problem, not a person. Because deep down, they already know the truth they'll never admit aloud. If ghost units existed at the level they imagine, they would be studying you, not training you, not teaching you, not leading you, studying you.